All right, just to kind of let y'all know, number one, the interlocal service boundary agreement, the resolution from the city of Palmetto has been deleted, so we will not be starting with that. We will be starting with number two, which, who's going to come on down?
Madam Chair,
John? Oh, whoa. I'm not.
Scared me.
what we're going to do today, we had three items, major items scheduled on the work session. And what we're going to do today, we're going to leave addressing off today, and we'll get with the board hopefully on the 17th of April. Seems to be an open work session date. The first item that we would like to cover are our comp plan LDC improvements, and Pat will be doing that. If we have adequate time after that, then we will move on with the sign changes. If not, we will do the signs also on the 17th. I haven't firmed that up with Diane and the administrator yet, but on the calendar, that date looks open. So that's our plan for this afternoon.
Well, let's get as much done today as we can. So whomever is starting.
Which 17th is he talking about? 17th on the Saturday?
April.
Oh, okay.
Or April.
April, okay.
Where are we
Of course, he
first?
didn't say what year.
Yeah.
Assuming this year, but.
Not the way government rolls, unfortunately.
Okay, I'm just going to start it off, and then I'll turn it over to Pat Tyeski. But I think all of you know Pat Tyeski, and she has Chris. They work with SME consultants out of Orlando. And as you know, in the past, they have done our comp plan amendments and our land development code amendments, more recently, the urban corridors. We really started this process in December of 2016. We had the kickoff with the board. And then since that time, Pat has gone back, has done a lot of research with the county and other jurisdictions to look at our code and our comprehensive plan. We had another workshop with the board and the Planning Commission in August of 2017. After that work session, we provided a draft to the public, which has been posted on our website in November of 2017. And then we had a public workshop in January of this year with the public. So now we just wanted to bring back some more items, just focusing on a few issues that we wanted to discuss with you today. So then with that, I'll turn it over to Pat.
Good afternoon. What I would like to do today, change the pace a little bit. I don't have a PowerPoint to go through all the background and all that. We're just going to dive into some issues that we felt would be important to discuss with the board. When we had the public workshop, we noticed that there were some concerns and maybe some misunderstanding on what we're trying to do. We created 3 handouts to address the 3 major issues that we see with what we're doing and how people may be misunderstanding what we're trying to do. I want to start with the one that says Table 5, Future Land Use Categories and Zoning. And I think it may be easier for you to look at it. Oh, some of you have it in 11 by 17. It says Work in Progress on the top right corner. What we did, we took the information from the comprehensive plan, anything that had to do with your different land use categories. So we have the conservation, agriculture, estate rural, residential 1, 3, 6, 12, etc. And then we started with, okay, what is the purpose of each one of those? Then what are the ranges of uses that the comp plan says that we should be able to have within those categories? Then we created a column showing what the maximum density would be, and another column for the maximum intensity. So 1 dwelling units per acre, the other one would be square footage as it relates to the size of the lot. And then there is another column there that refers to your commercial locational criteria. And we can go into that in more detail later with the second table. But for now, this is something that came from your comprehensive plan that says, sure. We're going to put Table 5 on the screen.
Yep, there we go.
Oh, that helps.
Is there a mouse that I can maybe? Sorry, thank you.
You're better off.
It's foggy.
It's
an
going to be
attachment
very
in your
difficult to
budget.
read in
Well, we
there.
got
Blow it up.
this. We already have it.
You can blow it up on
We
your
got it
screen
here,
too.
too.
Just its attachment on the. We have that in our background material. Yeah, if you want to blow it up, I'm just telling people. It's on the screen too.
Trying
You
to get
can-
to the plus.
Whatever. Not making any sense. Nobody understands.
Using the old-fashioned white paper.
I got it.
There you go.
Okay. So I was saying the first column is the name of the land use category, and then there is a column that talks about the purpose. You know, what is the conservation category supposed to do? Then we go to the next column, and it tells you the types of uses that you would expect to find in that land use category. Then it shows density and intensity. The first two columns are gross density and net density. This one has to do with the FAR that is permitted. The next column is the one that I was talking about, that it refers to your commercial locational criteria. Your comprehensive plan says that it may be okay to locate some commercial developments within residential areas as long as certain conditions are met, certain criteria. Now, the part that we noticed when we started working with the comprehensive plan years ago was the disconnect between the comprehensive plan and the land development code and the zoning map. That's why we wanted to put all this in one table, one place, so we could correlate the two. So now we move to the columns that have the green color, and we move into the zoning districts. So what we tried to do here was to say, all right, so if we have a conservation future land use category, which zoning districts could we have within that land use category? So in that case, conservation, there is only one zoning district, which is conservation. Then once we have made that switch to the zoning map and LDC, now what is the density that you can have, and the intensity, and the maximum building size? When we talk about conservation and agriculture, there's not much to talk about because they are very limited. But if we go down to, for example, the R1 residential category, we start seeing that, oh, okay, now we could have a rezoning to conservation or to agriculture or to single family, to recreational vehicle parks, neighborhood commercial small, neighborhood. So that table is going to give you an idea of, if somebody comes in and they say, we have Res 3 for future land use, what are my alternative zoning districts? Before we didn't have that, so it was really hard to determine what was consistent with what. So by going through this exercise, we also realized that there were some densities and intensities that in the comprehensive plan were just not working well. So we grouped those changes into three main groups. The first change that we're proposing in terms of densities and intensities are just straight up changing the density for two districts. One is the ROR, that's the retail office residential, which is mainly a commercial type of category. Most of the development that you see in that category is going to be commercial. But you all know what is happening to commercial nowadays. People are buying more online. People are opening less stores. The big boxes are going away. So we can't have sustainable corridors with just store after store after store. We need to start mixing it up with residential. And we're not talking about single-family homes next to stores. We're talking about mixed use. We're talking about multifamily, maybe even townhouses. But these commercial corridors, and we saw it as we went through the exercise with the urban corridors project, that to make them more sustainable, we have to incorporate the residential component. But the ROR category, this mouse is going to be really hard to... It's hard for me to navigate through this, but if you scroll down to ROR,
Page 4.
you're going to see that the density that is allowed right now is 9 dwelling units per acre. If you can think of a developer coming in and saying, we're going to have boutiques on the first floor and a restaurant, we're going to have apartments above, at 9 dwelling units per acre, it's not going to be much that they're going to be able to do. So we want to bump that one up to 16. Again, this is in the ROR category. And it would be, like a straight change of density for anybody that has ROR future land use category and they have the appropriate zoning. Now, the other straight change that we're making in terms of density is for the mixed-use category. This one, it's a little bit more obvious. It's a mixed-use district. We're supposed to be mixing different uses on one site. So we're proposing to change it from 9 to 12. So these are the only two that we're just saying countywide, we're going to change the density. Now, in terms of intensity, which is for non-residential uses, the size of your development as it relates to the site, we're looking at changing, let's see, the IH category, which is industrial heavy. Right now, the industrial light category allows 0.75, but if it is heavy, it allows 0.5. And staff brought up that to our attention and said, shouldn't they be consistent? Shouldn't they be at least closer? And we're looking at what is happening, in the ground. What do we see? How are they developing? And we have found a few developments that exceed already the 0.5 in the industrial heavy. So that is something that we're considering in terms of countywide change. Now, the second set of changes in terms of density and intensity refer to affordable housing. So right now you have a density bonus in place that says you can bump up to the next future land use category density if you're going to do affordable housing. And there are a bunch of criteria that you have to meet, so many percentage of units being affordable, and you have to be near transit, and you have to be compatible, and you have to have public utilities and services available, all that. So we're going one step beyond that and saying, and if you're in the urban core, where we have the infrastructure already and where we want people to be close to mass transit and to employment and to services, then we created a table saying, this is how much we're going to bump up your density. Again, it's going to have to go through a process to make sure that there's compatibility, because they're going to have standards that they have to meet, but still it would go through a public hearing to make sure that it's in the right place, the appropriate location for it, and it's designed appropriately. So that one was the second set of amendments that we were proposing. Now the third one has to do with the commercial locational criteria. So I mentioned before that you have had for many years in your plan a system that says if you have this huge area of residential, those people need to be in proximity to services. Where do you go grocery shopping? Where do you go to get your haircut? Where do you go to, buy your medicines? So the county came up with an idea that said, okay, we're going to classify commercial as small, medium, and large. It kind of relates to your convenience store for small, and more community level for medium, and more regional for large, more or less that way. But in order to implement that, number one, you have to have the right location. And the comp plan goes into, you have to have an intersection of two arterials or arterial and collector, and it can be only so many feet from that intersection, and you cannot be, there are a bunch of standards for that process. So that's already in place. But the problem was that once somebody selected a site, they would be required to go through plan development. And that contributed to the proliferation of plan developments in the county. We talked about this before, where every time you do a plan development, the developer pretty much comes in and they get waivers for this and they get waivers for that. And yeah, sometimes the county may get something for the public benefit. But in reality, most of the items that go into the ordinance include things like, forgiving them for, height, get additional height, or so. We felt that if we could put a system in place where they could come in and ask for a rezoning, so they come in and say, okay, so my land use category says that I can have small commercial through the commercial locational criteria. Which districts would that allow me to do it? So there is a district already in place that is called neighborhood commercial small. It limits development to 30,000 square feet. And it talks about which uses you could have. So it's typically neighborhood convenience stores and those types of uses. So we're saying, let's offer that as an option. The PD is still going to be there. Anybody can ask for PD. But if somebody wants to go with the straight rezoning, maybe we can do it that way. So that was something that we wanted to do with this table. So anytime that you see a land use category, like for example, let's go to residential 6 on the second page. You look at density, intensity, and when you look to the commercial size limitation column, it says you could do medium. So that means a medium-sized commercial. So that means that you have to meet that commercial locational criteria. So if you look at the zoning districts list, those that have the asterisk next to it, it means those would be the zoning districts that you could use only if you meet that commercial locational criteria. So technically in a residential 6, you could have neighborhood commercial small, medium, you could have general commercial, professional residential small, medium, but only if those get approved based on that criteria. So it's not going to be in a local street, it's not going to be right next to a single family home. It would have to be at major intersections that meet those criteria. So whenever we have one of those nodes, we realize that in some cases your future land use categories would restrict the density and intensity. And if we're going to have one of those nodes, let's say it's a CVS, and somebody wants to do like a mixed use node, an activity node we're calling them, and they want to incorporate some residential there, we would have to make sure that the density would be adequate for them to have mixed use. So just for those nodes, we're saying you could bump up your density and your intensity. The intensity has to do with, how much asphalt parking you're going to see versus how much compact development you're going to see. And then there is also a restriction in terms of the square feet that you can have for those uses. So the comprehensive plan is now going to be working hand in hand with the zoning map and the LDC to make sure that we can implement that system with just regular zoning districts. So in the process, we have noticed that there are a few things that need adjustment. Like, for example, today, you could get a medium-sized commercial in a residential 1 category. When we saw that, we felt that residential 1 should be a more low-key, less homes, bigger lots. Why would you allow medium commercial? So we're bumping that one down. And we're not pushing any of them up in terms of going from medium to large or small to medium. So there are 2 of them for residential 1 and 3 where we said, no, we need to go one step down. Something else we noticed is that for the small, medium, and large, let's say it is a small commercial. So the comprehensive plan today says you can have up to 3,000 square feet. That's all you can have. Or if you ask for special approval, you can go up to 30,000 square feet.
Right.
So what that means is that they would have to come to the board with plans drawn up and designed to the T and say, okay, this is what my 28,000 square foot building is going to look like. And then it would get approved or it would get denied or approved with some modifications. Looking at those numbers, we realized that they were not consecutive. Like you would go 3 to 30 for small, 30 to 150 for medium, and then 50 to 300,000 for large. So we felt that we needed to make that 3 to 30, 30 to 50, and 50 to 150. So it's just making some modifications to make sure that it's going to work okay. In terms of the bumps, this table, even though it's not an official table, this table is not in the comp plan or in the LDC today, it's just a working table. We use strike-through underline so you could see where we were making those changes. If anybody says, why are we changing the density in the residential 3 district? Well, we're not changing it in the whole district. It's only for those nodes, if they get approved. So it's not going to happen at every corner. It's just where you meet that criteria. So I know that there is a lot there, and we felt that having this table would be handy for you all to understand, the changes that we're proposing. So that brings us to the second table. It's the one that has all the pictures in it. It says Table 4, Proposed Activity Nodes. So again, this one, the purpose of this table was for us to get organized with the commercial locational criteria and understand visually what it meant. Okay, I can have small commercial. how does that translate into types of uses and the scale of it and the size of it? So for small commercial, you see the pictures on the top that we have small, that would be a permitted use, so they wouldn't have to go through any type of particular review, public hearing review. And then you have the small SP, which means that you have more than 3,000 square feet. So now you get into a public hearing type of situation where now we have to have input from the neighborhood because it's going to be a little bit bigger than you would normally see. Same thing for medium. We have medium that would be permitted and medium that would be SP, and then for large. Again, we're listing the future land use categories where those could occur, and then we're listing the zoning districts where you could have those. Now, we noticed that we could work with the existing zoning districts. I think at one point before, when I came before you, we were talking about creating a bunch of new districts. Well, we realized that we have GC in place. The only thing that we needed to do was open it up for multifamily residential, and now it becomes a mixed-use district. Then the neighborhood commercial, small and medium, serve that purpose too. So the only district that we had to actually create was one that we're calling MX, which is a mixed-use district that would allow the larger type of development. So we're talking about things like the major shopping centers, with big box retailers, think about the Lakewood Ranch core, the Main Street area. So that's what that table was intended to do, just put the commercial locational criteria in table format, visual format. And the last table that I want to go through is Table 1. It's called Special Approval as Required by the Comprehensive Plan. So this table does exist. It is in the Land Development Code in Chapter 3. And basically what it is, somebody went through the comprehensive plan in the past, and they extracted every single mention of special approval. So when the comprehensive plan was adopted at that time, there were many situations where the county wanted to allow something at that level, at the comprehensive plan level, but the LDC was not ready for that. We didn't have the standards for it. It was not going to be, they were not going to be adopted anytime soon. So the safety net was, well, let's make sure that those projects will come before the board. And then at that time, we'll decide yay or nay. Is it going to work or not? So out of the comprehensive plan, I think there were 32 instances or more where the comp plan said special approval is required. Now, that's the first table. Now, on page 8, we found other provisions that were spread out in the LDC, and we included them there. And then on page 9, there were other provisions that were in the plan that were missed and were not included on that table. So this document includes every single provision that it's either in the plan or the LDC where it says you have to go through special approval. So many years have passed since that was adopted. And we have started noticing that in many instances, we have adopted standards. We now have standards for buffering, which before we didn't. We have adopted watershed overlay districts with regulations. We have in the past included the coastal high hazard standards in the LDC, so they're now in place. We have a whole section on wetlands. We have sections on density and how wetlands play a role in calculating density. So our exercise at this time was going through the plan, going through the LDC, and finding out, okay, where do we have regulations and where we don't have regulations, and which instances still should go to the board, which instances would be more appropriate if they go to the hearing officer. So this table, I'm not going to go one by one because it's pretty extensive, but I wanted to mention just a few so that so you know where we're coming from. The first one is page 3, item L. So the comprehensive plan said that anytime you had non-residential, non-agricultural development and you were within the watershed overlay categories where you require a permit for industrial waste, you would need a special approval. The code now today has standards that address that. It says if you're going to have a development that where you need an operating permit for industrial waste, this is what you do. And it says, and if you plan to do that, you need to demonstrate that this and this and this and this is not going to happen. So we were looking at that the way you look at a special permit use. Special permit uses are the uses that may be okay in that location, except that we have to make sure that they're compatible with the surrounding areas, that the public facilities are in place, and in this case, that the environment is not going to be impacted in a negative manner. So we were saying a hearing officer is typically charged with those tasks, ensuring that these uses are going to be adequate at that location. When you look at the criteria for approving special permit uses and the criteria for special approvals, they're very similar. The only difference between the two is that special permits didn't mention the environment, special approvals did. So what we're proposing is to include the environment as part of what the hearing officer would be looking at, making sure that there's no impact on the environment. I think I missed, I'm going to go back to page 1 because there were some that I had highlighted but not marked. Item C. It says, for example, that if you have a non-residential project that exceeds 30,000 square feet and you're located in certain land use categories, then you need special approval. Because we worked on that table where now we're correlating future land use categories and zoning districts, we can now tell, well, the zoning already restricts your square footage anyway. So, you know, it would be safe to say that the code already has standards for what happens when you are in a certain district and you are proposing a certain size. We have setbacks, we have height regulations, we have open space, lot coverage, you know, those types of standards. Next page, item E, again, is the Watershed Overlay category, and section 403.10 in the LDC includes all the standards for the watershed districts. Now, today, we have a, what do you call that, a reserved section for the Peace River Overlay. We're saying, let's just include that one with the other two. That way we have standards for all three of them. And the standards go into detail as to, you know, if you're going to develop within those, what do you have to look for? What are you going to have to meet? What standards are you going to meet? Coastal high hazard, I mentioned that. Now we have those standards in the code. That was letter F. Page 4, items R, S, and T. They deal with mining and earth moving. So the fact that we're deleting the requirement for special approval doesn't mean that they're going to be waived from going through preparing a mining plan and rezoning to EX. So the board is going to see those proposals anyway. We're just not going to see them as a special approval, which is just one line in the staff report that says, and approving special approval. With the earth moving situation, in the table of uses, in your zoning chapter, we have a line that says major earth moving, minor earth moving, and it says where would they be allowed and where would they be permitted by right or would have to go through a special permit. So we have tools to make sure that where we don't think is going to be appropriate, there's going to be a public hearing type situation. Item U, and I think this one causes a little bit of concern to some people. It says any project adjacent to a perennial lake or stream. This doesn't mean that we're going to waive the requirements of the code. By deleting the requirement, we're still saying they have to meet code. We have standards. If you're close to a water body, there are certain setbacks that you have to consider, and they're going to have to meet those standards. In this case, for example, if you have waterfront structures, you have to meet the standards for the planned development waterfront district, which already specifies setbacks and you know what kind of uses you can have and drainage and all those types of issues. Then, for example, the airport overlay district, the fact that we're deleting the special approval requirement doesn't mean that we're going to not take them as planned development. Right now, they're required to go through planned development. So you're already reviewing the planned development. There's no need to say and special approval. And let's see what else. let's say page 6, item AA. It's the affordable housing that I addressed before, where right now, if you come in with an affordable housing project and you want to use the bonus system, you have to go PD, you have to rezone to plan development, and then you have to get special approval. When you're doing an affordable housing, to start with, you're hurting for money. I mean, you want to provide as many units with the least amount of money possible to make them feasible. Having to go through PD requires a lot more investment up front, the preparation of drawings and designs. And so we have been working with Denise to make sure that this system for the provision of affordable housing is going to be easier in the processing of it, not necessarily less strict in the sense that there will be compatibility standards. There will be provisions that say, for example, you cannot put a lot adjacent to another lot if it is smaller than the adjacent lot. So if you have a residential 3 category next door, they are going to see lots the same size next to them. So we have some provisions there that are going to help make these projects go through the process a little bit easier, less expensive, but at the same time, there are certain provisions to ensure compatibility. And another one. This one is one that I believe has been a little bit confusing in the past, is page 7, double E. So right now, the comprehensive plan and the land development code talk about what happens when you're going to build a subdivision and you can't connect to the system, to the sewer system. The comp plan and the code said that you have to connect. You have to connect unless you get special approval. And then one of the criteria for the special approval is, or for that specific waiver, is that if it costs more than a certain amount of dollars, then it's okay to do it. We don't know when that amount was put in, but we know that prices go up, and that dollar amount is probably not relevant anymore. And we know that anything over a quarter mile is going to cost way more than that anyway. We checked in our office with our engineers, and they go, you couldn't get past quarter mile with that amount of money. So we thought, then why have that in there? Let's just get this straightened up a little bit. So there are 2 issues. One is you have a service area, which is a very wide, broad area in the county, and those are the areas that the county is willing to serve. It doesn't mean that the lines go that far, but the county is going to get there someday. But then there is also something called availability. Availability is defined in the state statutes, very, very detailed. And it depends on a number of issues, but basically it says if you're within a quarter mile, you have to connect. So they have assumed that a quarter mile is something reasonable to assume that people could afford that, could, compensate, with the cost of the homes. And the state provides certain waivers, like if you have 5 lots or less, we're not going to make you connect. 5 lots is not going to be enough to make up for that investment. So what we're saying is, instead of saying just go special approval, we're going to say if you're within the service area, we want you to connect. That's the requirement. But if you're within that service area but outside of the availability area, then staff is going to have some criteria to look at, and they may be able to approve that administratively, making sure that they're not within a watershed district, that they're not going to have any drainage issues or any environmental issues, so staff could do that. Now, if they are within the availability area and they still don't want to connect, we're saying they should go through a variance process where they can demonstrate that there is a hardship. Maybe I'm within a quarter mile, but there is a subdivision in between. So by the time I go all the way around that subdivision, it's going to be, more than the quarter mile. So in that case, the hearing officer could say, it would be irrational to ask these people to connect. Variances don't have anything to do with the financial portion of it. It would be more like it would be impossible to do it because of the distance or whatever. So that's how we're proposing to address that one, and we have been working with staff on that. If we go to page 9, I just wanted to point this one up. The second policy has to do with utility transmission corridors, and Sarah mentioned to us that there is something in the state statutes that we have to consider, that we may need to add some language to this, and it may even go away depending on what happens in the state statutes, so we'll have to address that. And again, here in 22244, we're mentioning the CEA. If you remember, before I talked about the coastal high hazard, the county has 3 different levels of coastal overlays or coastal areas. There's the coastal high hazard area, the coastal evacuation area, and the coastal planning area. So we took everything that we could find in the comp plan that says, do not allow mobile homes in one of these areas, put it in the LDC. Do not allow acute medical facilities in this other area, put it in the LDC. So we went through that exercise of putting all that in the LDC so that we don't have to take these projects through a public hearing process where all you're going to do is say, oh, yep, meets code. Then you have wasted their time knowing that, you know, if we know that they're going to meet the standard, why make them go through a process? Especially when it is something that we know that there's nothing more that you can do to protect that. And we even requested some of the staff reports because we wanted to say maybe the buffers are not working. Maybe we need larger buffers. Maybe we need to change that number. But we couldn't find any additional requirements. Now, there is something that we have found throughout the comprehensive plan and the code. Sometimes it will say, if the developer cannot meet the standard, the board, through the special approval process, may waive that requirement if there is an overriding public interest. So those cases, we're saying we should just let the board deal with that, but not through the special approval process. It's an item that they're going to look at because the code says it may be an overriding public interest. So at this point, that's what we're proposing, and staff will be looking at each one of those provisions and see if that's what we want to do. So that's a lot, but that's all I have to share with you today. And I know that there are many other different little things here and there. I mean, we have found so many little things that we see the opportunity to fix, and we want to address them at this time. But it would be, really difficult to go exactly, through every single point we're changing in the comp plan at this time. So if you have any questions, or if you take these tables later and you realize that, I should have asked about this one, please call Lisa, and we'll get you answers.
Got that. Yeah. Commissioner Smith.
Got that.
I'm fine.
Are you fine? Okay. Then I'm next on the board. That was a lot to take in.
Yeah.
The thing that's frustrated me most about the whole comprehensive plan land use is my district is growing. It's been ag for a very long time, and basically the future land use is Res 3 on most of it. The county is changing my district. We are putting roads in, which, once again, they need to be, and the future land use doesn't seem to keep up with that. And I've had a lot of citizens that are like, well, what are we going to be able to do? And I'm like, we really don't, and we haven't even changed the future land use, but we have these places where you look at it and we're getting ready to have a college, yet there's no place anywhere right now to even put a Starbucks. No offense, I haven't met a millennial that doesn't drink a ton of coffee. And there's nowhere even in the future land use for Starbucks to be probably within, as the crow flies, 4 miles of this spot. And it just seems to me that we have a tendency not to progress out with our future land use. Now, I also understand that we don't own the land on either side, that we have to wait for the landowner to come. But it just seems like we sometimes don't realize we sometimes impact an area just about as much as development. And I that seems to frustrate me and a lot of citizens, and I didn't really see that even being talked about whatsoever.
Yeah, so let me mention how we're handling this. So many years ago when they adopted that commercial locational criteria, that's what they had in mind. We have this expansive UF3 with no commercial at all, right? So they said, we can't really go and rezone every corner because we don't know what that developer is going to do. It would be like a hodgepodge of commercial without knowing if that developer is really interested in doing some type of commercial development. So the commercial locational criteria says if you have the right corner, the right intersection where you can have a Starbucks and maybe, all 4 corners, you come to the county and say, I meet the commercial locational criteria. I'm located at the intersection of 2 arterials. I want to do small, medium, or large commercial. The thing is that up until now, you have to go through PD. And for a Starbucks going through a PD, it's a lot of money and a lot of time, and there's no guarantee that you're going to get it. So what we're doing is changing that a little bit so that we use the straight rezoning process, and then they can come in and say, okay, I meet that locational criteria.
Yes and no. The problems I'm having is, in places, there is a 4-lane road now, which is fine. I'm talking about 301. There aren't many arterial roads. And there are a couple places where people own an acre, acre and a half, but they're so far from an arterial, they are told that the only thing they can do is commercial. So they're on a 4-lane road, and they're not allowed to put in a hairdresser. I'm trying to think of low-impact commercial, because they're too far from an arterial. And I've had that not once, but about 3 times. And that, I mean, no offense, that just is a little, they're not going to be able to sell their 1 acre or acre and a half for a house.
Yeah, for some of this is arterials and collectors too. But, the danger of allowing it on local roads, and in that case, I mean, they could still come and, they would have to do map amendment and all that. But
generally speaking, it's going to be quite costly. You're going to have to change it.
Yeah.
I mean, it is what it is.
yeah. But, yeah, I mean, this is trying to get a little bit closer to what you're talking about. Saying, where it makes sense, let's help them and make that happen.
I agree. I'm just saying I'm not sure we're getting close enough, but I agree closer is better.
Yeah.
Yeah, the hand grenade thing, I don't know, maybe not. But, okay, thank you. Commissioner Benek.
Yeah, sometimes I think that we'd be better off throwing out the whole comp plan, throwing out the whole code, and just starting over, quite frankly. This is so confusing to me, and I know them both fairly well.
What it is for the rest of
I know, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
It makes sense to me. I like it.
Oh, man.
I do.
That's why
I love it.
that's why we had to do this table.
I just love this. I've been through it before.
So, anyways, and following along with all this, I just want to say and I'm old, been around forever, was here when the comp plan was adopted, guys. I mean, I know what the reasonings were, okay?
Yeah, it's your fault.
So your question, what about Parrish? What about Parrish? Parrish was set aside to grow. That's why it was designated Urban Fringe 3, okay? So everything out to the urban service boundary line was designated as the place to grow in the county. That was the fact. How would you handle the commercial surfaces? Well, we didn't want to have strip commercial. We didn't want to have the US 41s, the US 301s. We didn't want to have that. So specifically, the comp plan was written to allow the major intersections, arterials, collectors. That was where it was going to go. That made sense. That's where you had available road capacity to handle commercial development. Never would any planner worth their salt say, well, we should just allow commercial all along every road, because that would be strip commercial, and we were all taught in planning school that, you're going to be whipped if you do strip commercial. I mean, so that's bad. Intersections are good. So that's why you have it the way you do up in Parrish, just let you know.
It's her fault.
No, it wasn't my fault. I did not write the comp plan. We had a consultant. I did not write the land development code. We had a
The
consultant.
part I took from that was that y'all prevented the strip mall, and I'm thinking to myself, I understood since 1989. You're trying to tell me that we haven't stripped all the way along since 1989?
Well, you have this thing called property rights.
I'm aware of that.
And
so
you
I'm
could
just
not take away, so you already had, let me go before 1981,
Oh, dear.
what the zoning was exact opposite.
She wasn't born yet.
The exact opposite. I was not. I was just barely out of college.
I
but
was
didn't know
here, but I stayed.
But, okay,
I stayed up in my own
So
area.
your question is, well, how did we get that strip commercial? Because
No, no,
that
no, no,
was
no,
by
no,
design.
That was not my question. My question was, you said that y'all did not want it anymore after 1989. No offense, I've been here quite a while, and we have not stopped strip since 1989. That's what, 30 years ago?
Because the zoning was grandfathered in, and the zoning before that time, the state-of-the-art was, hey, you got a busy road. Nobody wants to live on a busy road, so we're going to go 300 feet back along every busy road. We're going to do a strip. It was planned to do it that way. We're going to create strip commercial. That's why you have US 41. That's why you have Manatee Avenue. That's why you have Cortez Road. And a lot of that, when we did the new comp plan in 1989, was we had to recognize the existing commercial rights of those people. So I just thought it would be helpful to provide a little bit of background. And as the consultant has said, the idea was a lot of this was placeholders. We didn't have the standards that we wanted in place. So at that time, the Board of County Commissioners thought, the more we're involved, the better it'll be for the public. That was their attitude. More public hearings we have, the better it'll be. I don't know how you all think about that. I know how I felt about it all of my life as a consultant. I was sitting up here, and I haven't changed my mind. I don't think that's necessarily true. I don't think it's necessarily true that having to have everything come forward to a Board of County Commissioners is really the best thing for the community. So that's why I think we're where we are today. And the difficulty is going to be making sure that we have it clear enough so people understand what's required. I'm a little bit concerned. There's a portion on this table 5 at the very end, which you didn't really talk about, where it says the different sizes, category, commercial use, small, medium, and large, and then you have without special permit, with special permit. So it wasn't ever a special permit before, and special permits go to hearing officers. So the intent is that all of those changes will go to a hearing officer now?
Instead of the board.
Okay.
Because right now it's with special approval.
Well, that's going to be, you guys have had lots of meetings, right? You've had lots of meetings with the community or with who? Who have the meetings been to date on this with?
Well, we had the work sessions with the board.
Yeah, you just have to speak loud and close.
And then we had the public hearing, or the public workshop in January. And we
No?
have been
Oh, it's not on, sorry.
Nope, not on.
There we go.
Hey, try that one.
We had the kickoff work session in August of 2016, then another work session with the Board and Planning Commission in 2017. Then we put the documents out on the public with all the staff reports explaining what the history and what the recommendations are, and then our public workshop at the library in January. And we also have been discussing this at Planning Task Force meetings as well.
Because our special permits have been very limited previously. I mean, we have almost nothing that's a special permit anymore that I can think of, because, I mean, that takes a hearing officer, and I can't even remember last time we had a hearing officer, right? I mean, we just have very few things. Now we're talking about, can you just explain so I understand that chart on page 7 when it says category, commercial use, small, medium, and large? That used to be, then you'd know when you had to kick into doing plan development. So it's the same thing. So if you've got, you're in a residential future land use category, and the maximum, let's say Res 6, and your maximum is 30,000 or whatever, and you want to go to that maximum, you have to get a special permit. Is that what that's saying?
Yeah, when you look at the table for, like, for example, residential 3, today it says that you could have medium. So you go to that table and it says medium, then you're restricted to 30,000 square feet, which could be approved administratively. Okay. But then, if you want to do anywhere between 30 and 150, then you would have to go through special approval, meaning you would have to get a PD and come through the board and get approval of that.
But now you're going to go to
We're saying
a
it would
hearing
be,
officer.
It would be treated just like a special permit use, where it would be, well, it may be okay if it's more than 30, but let's look at the surrounding area. Let's look and see, are the roads going to support that? Is the compatibility okay? So it's the same exercise that they would use when they're reviewing a childcare in a residential area, for example.
So would there be very specific criteria that the hearing officer would evaluate? The problem for us sometimes is when the criteria is vague. I mean, people want to know why we're making the decisions we are. When it's pretty clear cut, we could make a good decision. I would think it's the same for a hearing officer. I mean, they have to have criteria to review it again. So is there going to be additional criteria created as part of this land development code?
We have a section in Chapter 3 that, I don't know if we can pull it up, but that has the review criteria for special permit uses.
Okay.
And I know, just off the top of my head, that it includes compatibility with the surrounding areas, impact on public facilities and services. We're adding the one about the environment. And we're going to get to it in a minute in the screen over there.
Go into that, I can't tell what chapter that's in.
It would be chapter 3.
While they're doing that, we do have a scheduled hearing officer each month.
Yeah. But they haven't done much, right? I mean, you're talking about maybe even needing more hearing officers. I
Because they
don't know.
would be coming to us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't quite understand that.
And to clarify too, a plan development will still be an option. This is just, they may have to either, if they still want to rezone to plan development, they still can if this goes forward. But this would just give another option. They can do a straight rezone and then go to hearing officer as well.
Okay.
Now, something that that I should mention too, when you go through the hearing officer and do the rezoning, the board will look at the rezoning. You look at the rezoning and decide, does it make sense to have commercial there, yes or no? You're not going to get a site plan, because when you do rezonings, you don't get site plans. So the person is going to come in with just an idea. I want to have a commercial place, and I'm going to have maybe, whatever square feet. It's not going to exceed that maximum. But it could be a Starbucks, but it could be a nail salon. It could be, the different uses that are permitted in that district. So you don't see that site plan, but then the developer goes, okay, I got my zoning, now I'm going to go design it, and then I go to the hearing officer. So the hearing officer can look at it and say, oh, that setback is not going to work there because you have a single-family home right next door. You're going to need a wall and buffer and shrubs and whatever. Your parking, you need to make sure the parking is on the other side so that the noise doesn't bother the neighbors. What they typically look at when they look at a special permit use. So that's a big difference. Now, if they decide to go PD, then yeah, they come to the board with the rezoning, specific site plan, detail, parking and landscaping and, everything that the PD typically includes in the general development plan. Did we find the
I guess.
okay, standards for review and approval? Can we make it a little
Can I
bit
ask one
bigger?
more question? I don't know if did we?
Reading that to you.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were done.
She was reading it to you, or trying to.
Well, it doesn't do us
Oh,
any
here
good
it is.
just for her to read it to us. I mean,
The criteria says it has to be consistent with the comprehensive plan and the code. The operation of the use will not be detrimental to the public health, safety, and general welfare. Not impede normal and orderly development and improvements of surrounding properties. Ingress, egress is going to be reviewed. The use is compatible with the surrounding uses and the desired character of the area. It will not have a substantial adverse effect on archaeological or historical resources. Screenings and buffers will be appropriate. And the last one is the one that we're including now that has to do with the environment. And now, this is the criteria that they would be looking at in terms of, the proposal that the developer would have designed based on the standards of the code. So the code says, what your setbacks are going to be. We have a section on compatibility with residential. So in terms of height, if you're next to single family, you have to do more, additional setbacks. We have a section on buffers that says if you have commercial next to residential, there's this much more that you have to do. So it's not that they can, like with the PD, they can pretty much come in and propose flexible standards and, those types of things. If they are going to go the rezoning route, you have to meet code.
Okay, so what we've been looking at, the table 5, future land use categories and zoning.
Yes.
So I'm just going to pick one, Res 3. So in Res 3, I can do commercial, small, 30,000, or excuse me, 3,000. Does that require a rezone?
Yes, you would still
Okay.
have to.
So you
rezone.
still have to have a rezone?
Yes.
So that rezone would come forward to the board, and they wouldn't need a site plan or anything.
No.
If they want to go above 3,000, then they submit a site plan to a hearing officer, and the hearing officer has very specific criteria to look at. You don't have special approval, you don't have specific approval, you don't have plan development unless they want to. Is that what you're saying?
That's right.
Okay. Just want to make sure I understood what we're talking about. I hope that helped clear it up.
Madam
Chair.
Oh, I made it worse?
none of us.
No,
Madam Chair, I just want to point out, that this process the consultant's proposing, the main difference is the straight rezone, no stipulations.
right.
Right.
And this is no plan. So you're not regulating the operation of the use. You're just regulating future land use classification. Then when it goes to hearing officer, the stipulations kick in at that point.
What happens?
That's a major change.
When they want changes to the stipulations, it's the hearing officer?
Depends if it's a substantial modification or not. The staff will have to answer that.
Can we
I know, I'm.
Hearing
I'm-
officer cannot grant
A lot of people
any
on the
have a
board.
chance, please?
exceptions.
You're making it worse.
Yeah.
A hearing
Yeah,
officer.
we got a lot of
can-
people on the
I get to
board.
write- I
Can't
get to
all
ask my
talk at
questions.
once.
I'm almost
We have
done.
to-
I'm almost done. I get to ask my questions like anyone else. A hearing officer cannot grant any exceptions to any land development code requirement. Is that true?
That's correct, yes.
Well, right now, that's not exactly correct. Right, there are some proposals to have adjustments and modifications that exceed a certain cap go to the hearing officer.
But not specific approvals. Specific approvals, as you see with a plan development project, can only be done through plan development with the Board of County Commissioners. A hearing officer cannot grant a specific approval. And that's like where you ask for the reduction, a waiver, not your standard variance that a hearing officer sees.
And you wonder why people get confused. Commissioner Whitmore.
In the little city I was from, it took 2 years to go through this. And Pat, I have to give you credit. I mean, I just love listening to your presentations. I mean, but I'm also one that likes to get it done. We've been going through this like 2 or 3 years, and we bring up little chunks, and then it goes into Never Never Land, and I guess it goes through the public hearings and on the internet and stuff. Where are we? When are we going to start getting something hardcore that we can vote on? Because, you know, I think this has been about 3 or 4 years. 2 years it took for just a little city of Holmes Beach, but this is like 3 or 4 years, maybe 5. I know it's a big job.
Right now, our schedule is to move forward with the Planning Commission for the comprehensive plan amendments in April, and then the first hearing before the board in May. And we have to deal with the comprehensive plan amendments before we can bring forward the land development code amendments. So it does take some time, but we are proposing to do another work session in front of the Planning Commission in April, just to give them a summary of similar today, and then the first hearing in April.
Of what, the LDC or
The comprehensive plan.
Okay, so we're doing all this ahead of the game because we still got to do the comp plan changes. And then we'll come back in the LDC, we'll marry it with the comp plan, which is supposed to be, so why are we talking about all this now when you still got to do the comp plan? I'm just curious.
Well, this is the comp plan. It's all related and all tied together. So, but in order to bring forward the land development code amendments, we do have to start with the comprehensive plan amendments, which deal with your special approvals. There's provisions within the comp plan that really don't belong in the comp plan where we need to move them to the land development code, but we have to bring that forward to you first.
And we have pulled some out, right? When you cleaned up the
Yes.
books and all
In
that.
2015, we did some cleanup between consistency
Public
between the
Works. land
land development code and the comprehensive plan, created the property maintenance manual and the public works manual.
So you're thinking next, end of the year?
By the end of the year, we hope to have the land development code amendments finalized.
Oh, thank you. That's what I just was waiting.
Commissioner DeSabatino.
Thank you for your hard work, Pat. She drives from Orlando.
Well, I apologize for being out the first about 10, 15 minutes. I had a conference call for Florida Local Government Trust, where we decided to just go with the, take out the S&P and just like what the county did a few years ago. However, so I'm coming to the table, basically, and picking this up, and if I am totally clueless as to what this actually means, I'm sure that the rest of the people are too. I'm picking up Table 1. Special approval is required by Manatee County Comp Plan. So I went to the comp plan first. I took out that book, and I'm referring to sections. Well, you said 401, then that's not the comp plan, that's the LDC, so I went to this other book. Okay. So it's just really confusing to me, and I'm sure they'll be confusing to the folks out there, you know, who are really concerned about a lot of these changes. And I'm going to go to your page 2 of 18 of your draft, section E.
Which one? This one?
I just said
Okay.
Table 1 in your packet.
Right.
Table 1, okay. Second page, E, any project which requires preliminary site plan, plat approval, which is at least partially located in the Manatee or the Evers Watershed Reservoir Overlay category, paren 5, paren 7.
Whatever.
Then you go to the next category, proposed action relevant sections. what does it mean, delete requirement?
Okay, this table,
And then, I'm sorry, let me just finish. And then then this section refers to 403.10, so I go to my handy dandy 403.10, which reads regarding watershed protection overlay. And at the end, it does reference, 403.11 references Peace River watershed. So, if anyone picked this up off the street and they would just say, delete requirements, are you deleting all the requirements in here? Because they're huge. And so this whole thing is very, very confusing.
Madam Chair, if I could just pipe in for a moment here. If we go back for a moment, and Betsy can help me if I get lost, because
I
I'm
don't
not a
want
planner.
Betsy to help. I want staff to help. Betsy's more confusing.
Well, I have to just explain something why we're doing this. Denial of special approvals right now is not legally defensible. The special approval process was a temporary placeholder put in by previous planning director because they were doing the LDC and pieces and didn't have time to write the standards. And Betsy can confirm this. They just didn't have time to do it. Or for whatever reason, and it never got fixed. It never got amended. The code's been neglected. Special approval is not a separate development order. You deny a rezoning, you deny a site plan, you deny a special permit, you deny a variance. The special approval is a process. I think Mr. Grimes pointed out in one of our hearings today. Special approval just means you have to go through a public hearing for the board for rezone and plan development. The whole goal of the current comp plan is to push everyone into plan development, public hearing for the board. Back in '89, rezonings, all the stuff was legislative. You can do what you want. As long as you have public purpose, you can do what you want. Courts will uphold you. Now we've got the Snyder case, and I keep saying quasi-judicial, I'm on the chair, due process, circumstantial evidence. We've heard all of that. Now it's tightened up, and it's an entirely different process. But we have a comp plan and code back from '89 that treats it like it's legislative. Special approval has to legally come out. There's no choice about that. It has to come out.
I understood that one.
So I'm just being frank with you folks. If you want a legally defensible comp plan and code, it has to come out. Now, I'm not saying it has to be done a certain way. You can't do it other ways. But the intent was always that there are already development standards in the watershed overlay zone.
You're not staff, please.
I can ask my board chair a question if I'd like,
know.
Robin. You stop it.
She asked if she said something, could say something.
I'm sorry.
And I said,
You're
no.
not the chair, Robin.
I know
She
I'm
is.
not.
I directed my question to the chair.
5-minute recess. Come on, we're getting way out of hand. Let's go. Come on, we ain't gonna argue about this. 4:07, we'll be
That's
back.
why I'm leaving.
Straighten it out, and then Commissioner DeSabatino is still on the board. So we'll let Lisa say a few things, and then if you still have more questions, and then we'll continue through the list of commissioners that are still on the board. Lisa?
Okay, well, what I just really wanted to start out saying, the comprehensive plan and land development code today is convoluted. It's confusing today. I think the board on every public land use hearing has a hard time understanding the policies and the land development regulations that you currently apply to case by case. The purpose of this is to clean up the existing language in the comprehensive plan, and this is only a sample of some of the documents. We will have, and we do now, which was provided to all the county commissioners in November, the strike-through underlying information, the staff reports explaining what the current regulations are now, what other jurisdictions do, and what the consultant is proposing. When you look at letter E that you looked at for the watershed provisions, the delete the requirement is to delete the term special approval. I don't think that everybody understands what special approval means. In some cases, it's different. Just because it says special approval does not necessarily mean every case goes before the board. When there's an X in all of the columns, rezone, special permit, preliminary site plan, it depends where an applicant is and when they can receive special approval. So a case could be administrative. It might require special approval. What does that entail? It's not described in the land development code, and that's what we're trying to clean up. When Pat has delete on E, she's deleting the term special approval, but looking
that.
we are, and that's the summary of what we were going. This was supposed to be like a quick look, a working document for staff as well, but you will get the information when it comes to hearing to you. Then you rely on 40310, which includes provisions for watershed requirements. There's no additional standards that come about with the plan development review process. You rely on what is in your code.
Still have questions to Commissioner DeSabatino?
Yeah, it's just very unclear as to all this. You know, I guess the ultimate goal is to clean things up, but it's just so convoluted that, you know, the general public cannot understand, and it looks like just smoke and mirrors, and I don't know what, that's what they're going to say, that we're giving up the board's hearing of certain cases, and you're just going to give it to a special hearing officer, a special magistrate. We might as well, you know, just phone it in. You know, we're not going to need the board and not going to need to have public meetings and have things on the table.
Not in every case. I mean, if we want every application to go to the board, then this board collectively needs to make that decision, and you'll have a lot more cases coming before you. It doesn't make sense. We need to utilize a hearing officer when it's appropriate. When it's appropriate for administrative staff to review an application, there is no need for everything to come to the board. And we're not even taking away plan development. It will still be an option. A hearing officer is a public hearing. I think some people are making assumptions that because special approval is being taken away, that nothing will come before the board, and that's not true. People, they need to read the documents to understand it and come to the hearings.
And the public has no clue what you're talking about.
This table is handy because it gives you case by case what would happen, because in many cases, the application would still come to the board anyway.
Suggestion.
Yeah.
But then when you look at the staff report, it says, you know, we're approving the rezoning and then we're approving the special approval. So it's like a double approval for something that can be done in just one approval.
Are you done asking questions?
Yeah, never.
Okay, Commissioner Johnson.
Yeah, just a couple things coming from a different angle, if you will. The public hearings and stuff that you had, were they well attended? You know, I'd like to know if this thing is getting really vented with the people that use it, because, you know, to me, it looks like the Planners, Engineers, and Architects Full Employment Act, you know, to try to sit there and figure out what's going on in this thing. So I really want to know that they have had a chance and that we're going to get, that you've gotten a lot of feedback from them, because ultimately they're the ones that are going to have to, you know, go through this thing and understand the changes that we're making and why we're making them, and hopefully it will be a lot simpler. And from my standpoint, You know, I think at the next work session or whatever we have, you know, to me, you know, just give me an executive summary as to how this is better than where we were at today, if you will. You know, to me, to go through all these different little innuendos and things, that's your job, you know, type of thing. So, you know, I just, you know, to me, I want to see the big picture and I want to know that the public and the people that are going to have to use this are going to say to us, yeah, this is really simple. We now know what we can do with our land and how we have to go about the process. And that's all. That's the extent of
Barnott, were you done, Steve? Okay, Mr. Barnott.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We've shared these changes, these improvements with the entire community. They're on our website. We've held meetings out in the public. We've invited the public in. We've blasted this information to anybody and everybody that's involved in land planning, any type of job like that. We've gotten the information out there. They understand some of this. They see this. People have made significant livings helping customers through government processes.
Absolutely.
And, you know, we are trying to simplify that, not to take away that market, but to say people understand it. And when we started this thing back quite some time ago, our comprehensive plan and land development code it contradicted each other in so many places, in so many cases, that we went through and tried to clean that up first and take the contradictions out. And we did that. Now, this is the next step where you start with your comprehensive plan, and when the comprehensive plan was created and even changed and through the years, previous boards and others tried to make that a regulating document. It is your growth regulations or vision, but your regulating document should be in your land development code. But we're trying to get the comp plan back to your vision and the land development code as to what some have referred to as a zoning code, which that's where the criteria is. That's where you look at what you can and can't do, or what you should be doing with buffers and things like that. There's been some discussion about, well, you're gutting the environmental. We haven't touched the environmental stuff. We've strengthened it. So, you know, I'm not going to stand by for that argument that we're taking the environmental stuff out because we haven't. We're not. We're here to protect the environment. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I'm done.
Commissioner Smith, and then Commissioner Ball.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm getting lost with this hearing officer. How many do we have now to deal with this issue, specifically what we're discussing now?
How many hearing officers?
Yes.
Do we have? I mean, we can add on to our hearing officers if this gets approved. We can. I mean.
Yeah, Madam Chair. Basically, we advertise for hearing officers to apply periodically. They're listed in a resolution the board adopts. And most likely, if this was passed and into the workload of the hearing officer, we would re-advertise and solicit some.
Well,
The question he asked was how many today, so there's 0 today?
There's a list of 6 or 7 of them.
Okay. And
They're I didn't bring it with me. It's attached to a resolution.
Okay, all right.
specifically for this, we have 6?
For this, you mean land use public hearings?
No.
There's 2 different lists of hearing officers. One here, stuff in the county code, and one here, the land use. We have them there. They do have special permits and variances. I believe a week and a half ago, they heard a variance and special permit. Their agendas might have 2 items on it once a month. If this was passed, there'd probably be more on and probably meet more often.
Okay, if the Board of County Commissioners is having trouble understanding what it's been saying, and this commission is having trouble understanding the process of what we're going through, and if we can't explain it to our constituents or the general public that wants to spend money and do business with the county, we have a problem. I cannot understand mostly what we're listening to. I have some suggestions, but we had some meetings. I don't know whether the community was there. Who is the community? I'm talking about people got some money to invest into housing, to commercial property. I'm not talking about the person down there who may not be interested in doing anything, showing up to a meeting. Are we going to be able to do business with people who want to build houses, commercial property, residential, large developments, and make it more easy? For example, I haven't looked at this whole document. How is it easy with setbacks and things to do affordable houses, for example? When I hear people saying, we can't do affordable housing in this district because you don't have the right thing in place. Does this document have the right thing in place? North of the river, south of the river, wherever it may be?
As part of the amendments, we are looking at allowing a density bonus for affordable housing, which we do not allow today.
It's not in this document. You're looking at it still.
Excuse me?
You're looking at it. That's what you said.
Well, we're going through the process, and for the comp plan amendments to come before you in, April, May, this is the beginning of that.
Okay, so we don't have anything in place today?
No,
Okay.
no.
Okay. What are we comparing our information with? Are we comparing it with other government agencies such as St. Petersburg, where the entire downtown was dilapidated, no apartments, no commercial, not even thriving? And I don't know when the last time I'm being to a meeting when I hear people who have partnership with us say, well, we just hired somebody that lives in St. Petersburg. That seems to be the theme every time we go. But they get incentives from us, but they say they can't hire anybody from here because of the housing situation. So what are we comparing what we're doing to?
We, in our firm, we have done comprehensive planning and land development regulations for many communities in the state. So we have figured out, what the typical processes are versus what unique things are, like this special approval in Manatee County, something that we hadn't seen anywhere else. We knew from the beginning that was something that was causing some trouble, that was making things more difficult, just because in the county. When we look at land development codes, if we're writing a section, we go compared to other cities in the area or other counties in the area or other jurisdictions. We're always looking for what other people are doing. And we know that, for example, St. Petersburg, downtown is successful. How are they getting there? We know, for example, Sarasota, those buildings are way too close to the sidewalk. Why are they doing that? So, yeah, we look at good examples and bad examples. We're always looking at what other communities are doing.
Now, my other question, Madam Chair, then I'm going to yield and come back because, we've been talking about this for 3 years. I've been here. The hearing officer, hearing master, I thought it was consensus that we was not going to shift all our authority to a hearing officer.
Madam Chair, if I could follow that, I think what you're recalling is that conversation on it's about the impact fee ordinance.
We talked about impact fee. We talked about that too, absolutely.
That was different.
We talked about that, but even when we get to our land use and other things, I need to know what we're going to shift and what we're not going to shift to a hearing officer.
I think they could do a chart on that, a matrix chart that shows exactly what they're proposing. And just because the consultant's recommending something doesn't mean you have to do it.
Remember, this is a work session. We're not voting on anything.
And you may have, if you see a list and finally see what's being, but you may say, well, 2, 4, and 5, we want to retain jurisdiction over. That's fine. Mm-hmm. I'm just asking not to throw the baby out with the bathwater because this is a project we need to move forward on.
Okay, in the comprehensive plan, my last comment, I'm going to yield because I don't know how far I'm going to be going on this project right here. I can go into any government agency. I can go to Sarasota. I can go to the city CRA, all these places. Comprehensive plan, they hand to the developer, this is what it is, this is what you can do, this is what you can't do, it's a pamphlet, this is what your setback requirements for this zone, this is how much you can get for incentives if you do this, you do that, if you got enough green. I don't even see that coming from us. You can go in there, give me this and walk out, and the person want to do business and come back and say, this is what I want to do right here. So, and they lay it out. I don't see that coming. I don't see something that's showing, here's the rules of engagement, what I'm saying. And I don't even see us getting close to that. We're talking, but we got to lay this out when somebody want to do business, that they can grab this thing, leave out, and say, okay, I know what I got to do. Yep. Not sit down with someone and start guessing, and they start saying, well, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do this. It needs to be laid out in a document, just like a loan application or something. So, but I don't see where we're heading at on this. Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right, Mr. Barnott, real quick. Then.
Today, you can't do that, Commissioner Smith. Somebody can't grab our comp plan and land development code and do exactly what you're saying.
Right.
When we get through with this process, they will be able to do that.
Okay.
All right, Commissioner Ball.
Okay, real quick, I might have a solution here. Number one, I want to know, do we have to vote to approve this
Do they know?
that you've presented today?
No, no, this is.
No, I know we're not today. I'm saying before it's all said and done, after the next
Yes.
hearing. Do we have to vote on this?
Yes.
Then it's very important that this board understand exactly what it is that you're bringing forward. And all except for maybe Betsy, and I'm not even sure that she does. I know Carol doesn't because she's, this isn't her specialty. I would dare say that the majority of us here do not understand what you've brought forward. Now, I know before when we've gone through this, you've actually met with each individual commissioner and you've done a briefing. Why was that not done on this?
We will do.
Okay, but we haven't done it yet.
No, this was just to talk about these 3 items.
Okay, well, I think we
Update.
you should do that, because if you want this voted, and I'm sure that time is probably of the essence, like it always is whenever anything's brought here, we need to understand, and so we need to have briefings. And I think everybody needs to remember, ultimately, it's up to this board, not staff or anybody else, but this board. So we've got to make sure this board understands what you're trying to present. I know it's bound to be frustrating because we're not in the same line of work, per se, as you are. So we don't have all the information, the knowledge, to be able to just understand it the minute you hand us all this. And I apologize for that, but that's just the way it is. That's government, I think. So I would suggest, if you want this approved, please set up individual briefings with the commissioners. Because, I got to tell you, I wouldn't vote for this. If we were going to vote today, I would not vote for this because I don't quite understand it. I don't understand all about the hearing officers, and I need a better understanding about everything. But I do have one more question. On page number 6 of this, the bottom one, DD, I don't quite understand, and this is see why you need to do individual commissioner briefings. Projects where nuisance exotic vegetation will not be removed pursuant to section 701.4.e. Can you explain all that? Because I'm not sure about why we would be keeping nuisance or exotic vegetation. Help me, please.
Basically, what we're trying to do here is that there is a section in the code that today says you have to remove that vegetation. But if for some reason they don't want to do it, they can come to the board and say, because of this and this and this reason, I'm not going to do it. And the board can say, oh, all right, or no, you're going to do it. So what we're saying is that the code already says that the department director may modify that removal provided that there is a management plan approved. And there are some reasons stated in the code that says if you have this situation, you may be able to remove it.
No.
So but then the same section says that special approval must ensure that the application meets these 2 criterion. It says the vegetation acts as a screening in a redevelopment project. So even though it's nuisance vegetation, it's serving a purpose, or it cannot be phased, or it would result in costly and extreme stabilization measures. So it's saying the only 2 reasons why the department director would approve them not removing it is if they meet those criterion. So we're just saying we don't have to call that. I mean, a lot of these instances is just that we call them special approval, and we want to not call them that anymore.
Right, we don't want to use those 2 words, do we? Special approval.
No.
And this would be a decision made by the department director.
It says that in the code
Correct.
already, but we're calling it
Okay,
special
director-
approval.
Okay. Well,
No.
So we
see,
don't
I
need
would
to call
be-
it that.
For me, and I can tell you, it won't be today. It'll be in my individual briefing that I receive on these issues here. I would be interested in maybe understanding that a little bit more, because I don't know why we would ever approve that, really, but maybe it's something I just don't understand.
And it is something that it's there. We're not changing the rules. We're just not calling it special approval.
Okay. Well, like I said, I think really to help make the whole process easier for everybody, to get it done as quickly as possible, you need to set up individual briefings with
Very good
commissioners
idea.
to go through this so that we each can ask our questions and have a better understanding of what we're
I think
looking
the
at here.
purpose was to introduce these 3 items, having the information with you now. You may be able to look at it, in more detail, and then the questions will start coming up, so that when we meet, there will be more specific questions.
Okay.
Commissioner Benak.
I think Charles had it right. I mean, the goal here needs to be stated. The goal is to simplify, to make it more clear, so that everybody does understand it, so that people will want to come here, invest, and have an easier process getting through this. And I tried to state that in the beginning, but some people didn't understand what I was saying, apparently. I do think there are, to a specific question about whether or not there are things proposed in here that would make it easier to do affordable housing. If I'm looking at this correctly, I think the answer is yes. For example, the urban fringe 3. It says today the maximum gross potential density is 3, but it's highlighted in blue and says 9 at commercial nodes. That's new, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so that would make it easier to get affordable housing. Higher densities equal affordable housing, right?
Yes.
Right.
Okay. So I guess I don't understand, Lisa, you said no to his question about whether or not some of these things would make it easier to do, if I understood the question correctly.
If we had it now.
No, I meant if the amendments go through, it would make it easier.
Oh, okay. I thought you said no. There wasn't anything
think
in
it was
here that would make it.
confusion.
No today.
I think he asked if they can do it today. This will help promote affordable housing through the county. Right now, there is a provision that you can ask for a density bonus to the next future land use category. Well, working with Denise and Jerry and your Affordable Housing Committee recommended that we look at allowing an increase in density in the urban core. That is one of the provisions that we're proposing as well.
Right, and the same true with the Res 6 and the Res 9. I mean, those
Yes.
are changes that are proposed in this comprehensive plan that we have before us today. So I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
Commissioner DeSabatino.
Sorry for my outburst earlier, but it's very, very confusing, and you're hearing from all different people what they think. I like what Commissioner Johnson had to say, that we need a narrative. I thought that was good. So special approvals are now going to, instead of SA, they're going to be DD, Director, Department Director.
No, not all of them.
No.
No?
Not all of them.
So it's,
No.
And that's why
specific.
each entry has a comment, because they're all going in different ways.
Yeah.
Some may still come to the board, others may go to the hearing officers, others may be
maybe
staff.
we need a cheat sheet of what comes to the board, what doesn't come to the
And
board.
That's that
That's
table.
what,
In one little thing.
If we could look at DD about the nuisance exotic removal on page 6. There's an X in every rezone, special permit, preliminary plan, preliminary plat. This is how your code functions today. You can get a special approval with any of these items. Doesn't necessarily mean you have to go plan development. If you go plan development just for any other reason, then you have to get special approval for this as well. This is how your code functions today. We're trying to clarify that.
Okay.
thank you.
Can you clarify, because I think Commissioner Smith touched on that when he asked the question about what we have on the books today. In the Southwest TIF, didn't we already have workshops and meetings to discuss the changes that we're making in intensity and density in the Southwest TIF?
Oh, that was adopted.
For
It
the
was,
urban-
that's
We
what
already
I thought.
adopted that.
So-
It's a corridor.
So when he asked if there's anything now, you said no.
Well,
Oh.
and I'm sorry, I guess I answered too quickly, but I just meant if we don't include these provisions, you won't get the additional bonuses that we're recommending. We do have the density increases in just the urban corridors, not the urban core, just along the urban corridors. This expands that provision.
Okay, so there are
Connie.
new provisions now. Is that why you were confused, Commissioner
Correct.
Smith? Okay.
No, yeah, it's-
Yeah, so we already have things, so maybe if you could just spell out, either in a memo or something, what we've already adopted that's in the urban corridor that you want to change into other areas to, that would be really helpful, but right now it's, and I think the biggest problem is the fact that the spacing between all these meetings has gone on a long time. So at one point, we had them all together. We were up at the Civic Center for a whole week, getting cross-eyed and going through every single page, and then we don't hear from anything for months on end, and now it's back on top. I mean, I think I've been on almost 8 years. We've worked on it every year since. So, you know,
And
it's
yeah,
confusing.
we have taken it in phases. So that first phase, the convention center, that was just the cleanup, just reorganization. We didn't change any provisions. And that was done.
Public Works books.
That was
manual, all
adopted.
that, Right.
Just so
And then the phase 2 was the urban quarters. Again, went through it, adopted, it's in the books. And this is another
This is
type of, another phase.
This is a big
Okay.
part.
Commissioner Ball, I can answer that one question on exotic species. Sometimes they're the only thing holding a bank in place, and then you remove them, and the
Ficus
erosion
trees
is
or-
horrible.
Well,
So-
Madam Chair, that's what I said. Maybe there are reasons that I'm not familiar
Yeah.
with. I said that.
Now, screening I had never heard, because I would think you could remove them and
Well,
put
me
something
too.
else.
That's
but
what I was
I do
thinking.
know on erosion, sometimes swift mud gives you because it will mess it up. John Barnhart and then Commissioner Smith.
You know, when you talk about something like that, we've got Rob and his section, the environmental group, that they go out and they look at all this stuff and they make a determination because they're all environmental scientists. Most of them have master's degrees in environmental science, and they will make the best recommendation to protect the environment. We've come a long way. We've worked on this for a long time, but we've gotten the Public Works Standards Manual. We got that stuff pulled out of here. We've got the Property Maintenance Code, where we were able to pull a lot of the code enforcement stuff out and put it in property maintenance where it belongs. So we have made significant progress with this board. I understand what you're asking for, and we're going to go back and we're going to huddle and we're going to deliver on what you want. But it's not easy to understand either. So we're going to make it as simple as we can. Promise.
Commissioner Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So my other question is that what we're saying with the Southwest TIF incentives and everything, what you're proposing and putting together now, will it include everything in Manatee County?
Yeah, the density, intensity changes that I noted earlier, I was saying that the ROR and the MU, that we were making some changes there, that's countywide. So right now we're considering countywide. Now, some of the increases, I said, well, this would only apply if you're affordable housing, or this change would only apply if you're in the right commercial locational criteria. So some of the changes are not across the board. They're for specific situations that could happen, that would be reviewed on a case-by-case basis. But we're considering the whole county. Now we're looking at the whole county.
What about revitalization of communities, slum blighted areas where communities are depressed and someone comes in and say, look, I would buy that whole block right there and redevelop that whole block. Is there anything in here that's going to empower someone to consider that and get it off the roads where it's not paying any taxes?
We've been
code
talking about
violations.
we've been talking about how complicated the process is right now, how complicated it is to go through the land development code, how complicated it is to understand the comprehensive plan. What we're trying to do is make it easier, and we want to get to the point where the comprehensive plan is implemented through the LDC, so the developer would only have to worry about the LDC, and maybe get to the point where you can do a user's guide, where it's just a trifold that you can get, all what you need to know in something smaller. But right now it is hard for those people to do anything because it is hard to navigate the process.
So we are working on that.
Working on making the process easier and easier to understand.
Thank you.
Today it was.
Okay, easier to understand, but we don't have anything right now, correct?
We're working on the draft. This is just a work session, so we have a lot of drafts that are online, but they're drafts, and we're still working with staff. We're still making changes, and they won't come to you until May with, okay, this is what we're proposing.
Be May this year.
Yes.
And will you need a vote from us?
At that time, yes. Yeah, right now it's just letting you know what we're working on.
Okay, all righty.
All right, anyone from the public wish to speak on this? If so, come forward, state your name. You have 3 minutes.
Do it gently.
They understand it when we do.
do it simple.
Commissioners, thank you for the opportunity. I'm Edward Pinto, Economical Housing Development. I think you all know me. My investor group and I would like to invest upwards of $100 million in economical housing in Sarasota, Manatee counties. We've been working on this for some time. We're still working on it. We're hoping to see some action that will allow us to proceed. Relative to what you've been discussing, we think that the board needs to consider higher density by right for economical housing. By economical housing, we're talking about smaller housing units. Those could be multifamily rental or they could be single family, but we're focused at the moment on multifamily. We think that might include a zoning overlay of, say, 20 units an acre for vacant sites that are within a half a mile of a bus route, or where there's a certain number of employees within a radius of that site. Those things can be calculated. We've looked at one site and we found there were 4,000 employees, about 1,400 are county employees within a 1 mile radius. However, there's no way to build this type of housing under the current zoning. Secondly, we think the static density requirements that you have and the intensity requirements are also a problem. If you build, let's say, a 1,400 square foot unit and then you have the floor area ratio, you're allowed to build X number of units. If you want to build 600 square foot units, why shouldn't you be able to build 2.4 times as many units given the square footage? And then the same thing goes for the intensity. So we think those types of formulas, by the way, Sarasota County is just in the process of adopting a similar provision that says if you build under 900 square feet units, you can double, just automatically double by right whatever you have. Now, their density is much lower than yours. Yours is low enough, but theirs is even below that. They've downsized for downzone even more than you have. So you double a small number, it's still not a very large number. But in your case, if you start doubling 6 and 8 and 9, you start getting the numbers that actually work. So those are the two suggestions I would have. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? State your name. You'll have 3 minutes.
And be nice.
He will.
Hey, Al always is. He's
Al Horrigan.
Yeah.
I'm here sort of, I thought everybody else was going to be here from the Planning Commission observing
They were
this.
invited.
And they
got
didn't show
more
up.
than left.
But I guess if this was an introduction, it was like, or an opening, it was like throwing a flashbang in. Got everybody's attention. I don't know whether anybody understands what's going on, but I didn't. And I've been doing this for 40 years.
Thank you.
And so I couldn't read the matrix.
Thank you.
And so if you're coming to the Planning Commission before you come back here, it's got to be clearer before it gets to us, because I'll still have the same concerns when it gets there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
Al.
you. Anyone else?
Here comes.
Hey.
Good afternoon,
State your name.
Commissioners. Jerry Lopez. I wasn't sure. I wanted to make a comment, not necessarily from a staff perspective. I just wanted to kind of give you some practical perspective, because it's kind of our job as part of the new department to be able to attract the developers to be able to do this. So we need to go through and seeing what's applicable on zoning to see what we can do. And right now, I have a lot of developers that are interested, and they can't do what they want to do because what's on the books right now doesn't allow them to do it. So it's making my job very, very difficult. So I wanted to let you know that I've been working very closely with the staff, and they've been great about pointing out what were some of the challenges so that we can kind of help facilitate some of that development. The first one has been through the work that we did with our Affordable Housing Committee. Their recommendation was to do the density pieces, and those have all been included in this that you see here. So we, from the affordable housing side, 100% support all of the changes that have been going on through here. And then just in general, I know that changes have been done on the urban corridor side, but it is very convoluted and very complicated. I'm also a planner by training, and I have a very hard time understanding it. So a lot of these changes are making it much simpler, and that will help after these, hopefully these are adopted, to be able to have, as Commissioner Smith said, you can have fact sheets of going through of what you can do to make it simpler and make it easier. So just from the practical perspective, that's something that we do need. Just to give you a specific example, there is a developer that I've been talking to that wants to do multifamily housing in the Southwest District with about 25% affordable. Exactly what we've been talking about. I know from all of our discussions from a policy perspective, this is what you all want to do. To be able to make it happen, they need about 20 units an acre. If you look at the table of what your zoning categories are, the maximum that you can do is 16 units an acre. Most developers, when they're looking at their pro forma, Mr. Pinto can tell you that you can't make that work. So no matter what you want to do, the numbers just won't work. You need the density to go with it. And at 16 units an acre, they cannot make it work. So they need the 20, and then given some of the other items there, he can get that double, so that would work for those 20 units an acre. And this is just a pretty normal multifamily development, and I'm trying to get some samples to be able to show you of what that would look like. So while that sounds a little scary in terms of a number, if you look at it, it's not really. It feels very normal, but it's exactly what we want to be able to attract, to get that investment. But right now, with the current zoning that you have in place, we cannot get them there because a lot of the sites, even though the urban corridors are there, a lot of the sites that they're looking at aren't along those. They're looking at in other places along the urban corridor. So I just wanted to share that with you to help me in terms of what I have, what I've been charged to do to be able to attract that investment in the county. Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry. I know that's something we've all said from the dais that it's important to us, and so I know y'all are working on that, so I'm glad to hear that what they said actually, you understood it was actually progressing. Commissioner Whitmore.
Oh wait, I think more public comment?
Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot. Dave. All right, come on. Thank you, sir.
Good afternoon,
Thank you,
everyone.
Here, all right, come on.
David Gustafson with DG Land Development Consulting. As a former Manatee County Planning Administrator, you know, and I got a consultant job now, and you know, all these regulations, I hate them. I'll be honest with you. You know, I want this. I love what they're doing here. I know they're trying to make it simple. I understand where they're coming from, and you know, you would think it would be just the opposite. That I would say, hey, all these regulations, all this bureaucracy benefits me, puts more money in my pocket. Well, I don't care about that. I want the community to benefit, and what they're doing right now, when many of the things that they're talking about are a benefit, such as the urban corridor. But I will say, you know, I'm working with N. Pinto and others. We sat down with John Osborne and we looked at all the available sites in the urban corridor, 41, 14th Street, you know, 15th Street East, and all of those sites that are available for us to do any type of economical housing, millennial housing, you name it. They're not working. They've got flood zone issues, AE issues. They've got a menagerie of issues. So I think the urban corridor is a huge benefit for other types of uses right now, redevelopment and those types of things. You know, we've looked at the one shopping center that we talked to Commissioner DeSabatino about. That the gentleman is not willing to sell. You know, so there's a lot of issues there. So I just want to let you know that I'm doing another project in the urban corridor right now, and it is a benefit. It truly is. The commercial location criteria, not a big fan of that. I haven't been a big fan of that from day one. In my mind, that makes somebody have to get into a car. It makes somebody get into a car. As you're saying, Commissioner, I've talked to people in Parrish, and they're saying the same thing. You know, I've got a property. I live on a house right on US 301. I got a 4-lane interstate in front of me basically right now, and I can't even develop my property because of X. Why is that? Why is it that somebody's being forced to a commercial location criteria? Mm-hmm. Just my opinion. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public? All right, we'll close public comment, and now Commissioner Whitmore.
And actually, I was going to ask the comments that Mr. Pinto made, does the commission have appetite to at least let our staff look at whatever, what suggestions he had, because it did make sense. 600 square foot apartments, 700 square foot, right now it doesn't work with the solutions, I guess, with him and Dave looking all over the county, and that's something that we should look at. Is that something that you're looking at now? Or is that a policy direction that you need from the board in the future?
The idea that of allowing to double the density, we're only looking at that for affordable housing.
Yeah.
Yeah, but for...
What about for workforce housing?
No, we only do that in the urban corridors.
Because we have employees, a lot of employees here in St. Pete that we hear live in St. Pete in 500 and 600 square foot flats.
Yep.
It's more affordable, and they can work and they drive here.
Yep.
The other way that you can provide affordable housing is in these activity nodes.
But
that we're
it's
talking
not all
about.
affordable, it's workforce. The workforce to me is affordable.
Yeah, in that sense,
We have to interchange the words.
Or
right?
economical housing, like he mentioned, yes. That's the idea of those activity nodes, that right now they're supposed to be just commercial. And we're saying maybe those nodes provide the opportunity to provide those lofts and apartments or condos for people who cannot afford or are not ready to move into a single-family home.
I just think we should be open, because what we're having our employees have to go to other counties to live because they can't afford what we offer now. And I don't know if we're willing to be open and look at areas. I thought we were. I know we were along the urban core.
I thought we were too.
Yeah, I think we should look at Lisa, I know you're getting, I would just wish we could look at something like that, because it makes sense. And, I don't want to lose our employees to another county and have them to travel if they could live here.
We're also opening up the possibility of doing multifamily in the general commercial category so that people can live close to the services.
I'm talking about higher density, smaller
Higher
flats.
density.
Okay.
Commissioner Ball.
Yeah. Jerry and Dave, I'm going to assume that you've both been involved in discussions with this review and the changes, trying to move it forward. And so maybe I guess my point of asking that is that I'm hoping that we'll have the same opportunity to have some of those conversations so that we can have the understanding that you do. Getting back to what Commissioner Whitmore was just saying, I totally agree. I think that we need to be open-minded in that regard. If we're going to make these changes, let's make sure that we're making changes where we're being more open to, I'm going to call it workforce housing or affordable housing. I don't think we need to be limiting ourselves. I've got a feeling that we're really limiting ourselves, maybe not. But I think we need to be very open to that. Because if not, why are we bothering, really? That's, we've got a great need for that, for not just our staff members, as Commissioner Whitmore said, but many other people as well, including a lot of seniors that live here. So if we're not doing that, maybe that is something that we can look at. I don't know. But I do agree with Commissioner Whitmore. That should be a policy decision that this board makes, and it should be in there. Yes, ma'am.
A comment regarding that question. Something else that we're doing, and I didn't mention all the changes that we're making, but right now, if you're in, for example, the residential 9 future land use category, you would assume, that allows 9 dwelling units per acre, right? Well, but the comp plan says if you do anything above 6, you have to go through special approval and plan development. And so it's like, what do you mean? I'm in a category that says that you could potentially do 9, so we're getting rid of that. We're saying, no, if you're in residential 9, you should be able to do up to 9 dwelling units per acre. Mm-hmm. So how do we fix that? Let's create a district that allows residential single family up to 9. So some sites will get rezoned, and they're going to be able to do smaller lots than it's normally allowed at this time. So we are addressing that problem from that side too, in the terms of, single family homes being able to happen without having to go through the plan development process.
All right, because I know we're hearing now 20 units per acre to make it workable. So let's make sure that we're offering that service. Maybe we are. I'm not sure, because I don't exactly understand what you have there yet. But, if we're going to, all I'm saying is if we're going to do this, then let's try to make it as easy as possible. That's all I'm saying. Thank you.
Commissioner Benek.
Yeah, and I know I got to hear Mr. Pinto's
I did too, it was good.
presentation. Did a fabulous one at the Chamber Task Force on affordable housing. I know Robin and I were both there. We didn't both speak.
I didn't speak.
Nope, but it was great to listen to. And I did say something, and I'll say what I said there. And, you know, it goes to my first comment, you know, we're all so used to what has been in place that it's hard to think something different. And we need to think something different. We need not just make tweaks to what we have. We got to think bold, as Commissioner Whitmore said. You know, zoning was created in the beginning of the 20th century to save lives. That's why zoning was created. It wasn't to keep people from living, and that's what we've made it. We've made zoning keeping people out, and we need to change that. And we have an opportunity to do that. So I would encourage us to look at, and what Mr. Pinto's talking about, he doesn't want to jump through the hoops and have to do a land use restriction agreement and check people's, see how much they're making today to be able to get an affordable house. He wants to have housing that's affordable for people. Economical housing, he calls it, and it's going to need a higher density. And where should we do that? We should do that in the urban core. We should reduce the number of parking spaces that are required, like Sarasota County is, allow smaller units. If they're smaller, and Sarasota County is doing that, I said that earlier today, Sarasota County is doing that. We need to get a bit more creative. And I know that that's tough to do. This is tough stuff to explain to everyone, but it's going to be tough regardless. We need to be clear with what we're doing. So we don't allow 20 units an acre anywhere today unless you're doing affordable housing or you're on an urban corridor, which has all these limitations, as been stated. But I think we know that we have to have higher density housing in our urban core. Otherwise, we're going to have to start looking about expanding our future development area boundary. And I know people don't want to do that because those are the most expensive services you can provide the further you go out. We've already set that as a policy. It's just we're going to have to get a bit more creative, I think, than where we're at today.
Commissioner DeSabatino.
Yeah, it would be great to have samples of what 20 dwelling units per acre looks like. You know, there's some really cool and innovative designs and flats nowadays. You know, we're changing with the times. People love the tiny homes. They love the container homes. So we need to be able to put that package together as well. You know, I know once an applicant comes before us and puts in their paperwork, we're not allowed to talk to them anymore because it's quasi-judicial. But before the pre-app, or if you have a pre-app and they haven't applied yet at the pre-app, correct?
Who?
In general, an applicant.
Yeah, correct.
Okay, so if they have a pre-app and then they're presenting something unique and innovative, and why can't it come to a workshop and see what we can put our heads together with and come back with, yeah, we like that. That's a great location. You need to do this and that. And then instead of them spending weeks and weeks and weeks trying to get a hold of the county administrator or the deputy county administrator or this and that, if they have an idea that's bold and innovative, let's have a workshop, come to the table, and see what they have.
We used to do that.
And so I don't see why we couldn't go back to that, you know, as long as, you know, all parties are in agreement. I'm just concerned, if it's on a bus line, then, you know, that's better for the millennials, that they don't need a car, or they can call Uber if they're running late. So then, you know, you can tweak the parking spaces. So, you know, let's get creative and not just tell people who want to come before us that, you know, it's going to take 3 years to get this through, or we don't have it in place. Let's create it. Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I like what Mr. Pinto and Dave and some of the proposals. I've met with them and talked to them You know, I have a personal goal to get maybe 300 people living downtown in walking distance of this building. And, you know, I don't know why in the world Sarasota can do it, St. Pete can do it, which was a dump, and I'm on the record saying St. Pete was a dump. Florida Association County wouldn't even go there to hold a convention.
Looks great now.
And now it looks great. They went there. Publix across the road. Sarasota has a Publix downtown. Even Tampa has one in the middle of the neighborhood, and we can't get one here. We can't get houses downtown. We got a jail that's costing us, what, $100-some thousand a year. We don't want to do nothing with that. It's just amazing to me, the vacant buildings that you walk in that you can put apartment units in. You got to change so you can get people to move into there. To the property you're talking about, Dave, and I don't need to know who it is. I know we're in compliance with, you know, people upgrade their property. Hey, but, you know, the city of Bradenton, you know, you got your code violation, you got crime coming, you don't want to fix your property up. We ain't giving you no alternative to sell your property. You either sell it or we're going to fine you. I mean, we just can't keep the distressed property, you know, in these neighborhoods that are not contributing to the community. That's why the sheriff said he needs 50 more deputies. We're not improving the quality of life. And people are getting sick and tired of it. You commissioners, we were there when we stood up to the retreat to Powers, when one after one, the presentation, everybody said, oh, by the way, I hired somebody from St. Petersburg. They live downtown. One after one. Partners, Field Entertainment say, our last 3 people came from downtown. St. Petersburg, I don't know, they thought we were sitting there. Wow. That's where they're getting the labor from. That's where the small houses at. That's where you can live downtown. You don't even need a car. You can go to Publix right there. You can go right there to a movie theater. You go eat your lunch and dinner. You don't even have to even do anything. So I don't know, we got Riverwalk right here. We got the museum right here. And we can't even put units downtown and bring 300 or 400 people to live here where we can empower the restaurants and bring economic development downtown. You go right here on Manatee Avenue, where the old 801 used to be at. You got property there. There can be houses development on that road, 2 or 3 stories right there with people living right there. That's walking distance off of Martin Luther King. So we just got to get creative. I don't know why it's so tough for us to get that done. You know, but we got to set barriers and time limits and hold people's feet to the fire to get this done. Our consultant, we got to see if that's moving in the right direction. Our staff, we got to make sure they're giving us everything. If people get offended, they just get offended. But we've got to protect the quality of life here. Or we're going to continue every year going through the same thing over again, and our employees are not going to get anything. Constitution is going to get everything. Our employees are not going to get anything. And I can see we're heading there year after year. We got to stop that. But there's a lot of economic development that can take place, but we just got to go ahead and put the regulations in where people can do business. I wouldn't do business with this here. You think I'd go and deal with the bank and deal with my finance and then go through all of this here, and I don't have the rules and regulations where, hey, and I can call my investors and say, look, we can do this deal in Manatee County. No, I'm going to go where it's simpler to do it, where the rules and regulations are already printed out, where I ain't got no gotcha going. So that's where we need to go. And we've been talking about it. I've been here for a little 3 years now. So we got to set a time limit and say May or whatever it is and fine tune it. But these distressed property owners that have been there for years, don't live here, don't want to sell, and they know what's going on to those units, you just can't keep tolerating that.
They're getting good rent.
You know, and yeah, exactly. They stopping people getting good rent from people. It's not decent housing. Those people are not helping the quality of life. You know, so we know who they are. And we got to put some on the books where some of them can sell out. And we can revitalize those communities. That's what we need to do. And then you won't have the sheriff saying he need all these deputies. He'll continue to need all these deputies. You know, this community is getting real diverse. You see the population coming every year? That's a diverse older population. So we either get control of it now or we just continue to squander our revenue. You know what we're facing this year, but I hope we can get something put together and we can fine-tune it in 2 or 3 years, but we need to get something where these guys that want to develop in this community are the people who come down from Washington to see me sometime, want to invest north of the river, people from Tallahassee that want to invest. First thing they say, you got to change this, which we're doing it, but it needs to be done.
It will be.
That's all I have to say, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I'm actually next and last on the board. As a person that grew up with a neighbor, gosh, maybe a mile down the road, maybe further, the people that do my briefing will tell you I have a hard time with 20 houses to the acre. I just can't get my mind wrapped around it. But I also, in ag, you learn, if a crop doesn't make you money, you give it about 3, maybe 5 years. And if it doesn't work, you go to something else. And what we're doing since 1989 is not working. We're getting further behind. And I do not want to move the service corridor area. So if I can wrap my mind around 20 houses to the acre, 20 units to the acre, excuse me, not houses, all of y'all should be able to. Because let me tell you, it hurts my sensibilities. But what we're doing is not working. And I think our staff knows that. We all know that the generation that we have coming up is different than my generation. For better or for worse, it doesn't matter. They're saying we want smaller houses. We don't even want a house anymore. And as a whole lot of people that have kids still in their house, they're dying for y'all to build something where they can kick their kids out. I mean, that's a huge problem nowadays. So I
Put parents out here.
Yeah. Staff, we have got to come up with something. It can't be all over the county.
That's right.
I mean, but there's places that it can be, and we have got to get it where these people that want to build these kind of houses, they know what they want. We have got to get something done. No offense, it can't take 10 years.
Right.
We need something sooner than later. And I know that ever since I've been here, we've been talking about affordable housing. I've said that we need it. And we all know we need it, and it has to be fair, and it has to be in certain places. But if I can get my mind around 20 units to an acre, anybody should. Because as far as I'm concerned, I wouldn't even put 20 cows to the acre. But that's just me.
Lisa wanted to.
Yes, Lisa.
I mean, and we hear you, and that's why we're before you today, and we're going to move forward with the plan amendments. That's the first step.
Okay, but I'm just saying that, once again, from what I know that people have been telling me, we've been talking, however you want to look at it, been talking about it for 6, 7 years, and no offense, that's not going to get it done. We need to get it done. We need to or at least have an area where we can start this small area, maybe move out. But anyway, Mr. Barnott, I'm assuming that we're going.
Not your fault.
Public comment is closed, and we've been here a long time. I would suggest you talk to the staff.
I just want to defend the process.
No, sir, no, sir.
Right.
Public comment's been closed. If you have something. I assume, Mr. Barnett, we do not want to continue?
No, we're done.
I'm sorry.
You could continue.
Thank you.
I'm leaving.
Nobody else on the board? Good night.
Are your